everyone, a very warm welcome to No Boundaries. I'm Laura McGoldrick, and joining me today, not in studio but from the comfort of Kirikiriroa, I've got Ross Taylor joining us, former Black Cap, and Scott Styris, he's been to Thailand, now he's in Melbourne, and it is a tough gig for him. Scotty, you all right over there?
Yeah, these holidays are getting to me a bit, I must say, Laura.
Yeah, nice for some. Roscoe, thank you so much for joining us on No Boundaries. How are you going? Fresh back from the Legends League, still playing a bit of cricket. You doing well?
Yeah, I didn't score many runs over there, but thanks for having me, Laura. Still using the Gunnermore bat, just not as good as it used to.
I don't believe that for a second. Now, last week we talked about the first test match between New Zealand and Bangladesh. The second one, New Zealand won, so that series was now drawn. Some interesting points coming out of that series. Tim Southee, the captain of the test team, described it as the worst pitch he'd ever played on in his international career, which is saying something because he's been around for about 14 odd years now. Roscoe, I'll start with you. In terms of Bangladesh, were you surprised at the pitch there or not really? I mean, it was I think it was the third shortest test match in terms of balls bowled. Were you surprised by that at all, or what did you make of the test?
Yeah, I think I was very surprised that it turned so much on day one. As you said, Tim has played a lot of test cricket, and for him to make a statement like that, easier to make those statements when you win. When you lose, not quite as easy. But no, I thought it was still an exciting test match. Maybe a little bit too one-sided with the way the ball turned so much, but I actually didn't mind. I thought it was quite exciting. The players who played their shots, got results where, the guys who, there was always going to have a ball that had your name on it, but the guys who played shots got some runs.
Yeah, one of those was Glenn Phillips, who played superbly. It looked like at times he was playing on a completely different pitch. But for your mind, Scotty, was that okay? Was that wicket okay? Is that what you want to see from a test match at favour, the bowler so much? Or would you like to see it change there? Or is that just the luxury of having the game in Bangladesh? You get to have a wicket that suits you, obviously.
I think you've got to look at the broader context of it all, and that is with the Test Match Championship going on, you get rewarded for victories. So if you are a side that perhaps isn't in the upper echelon, then how do you win? And sometimes producing a slightly substandard pitch means it's a bit of a crapshoot, and therefore you've got more of an opportunity to win the odd game, which will give you more points, and that is your opportunity to potentially get through to that final. So in some ways, I think we're starting to see, when you look over the last couple of years, we're starting to see a lot more result pitches designed exactly for this. So I don't mind it so much. I mean, it's a little frustrating as a cricketer because it means that, it's more luck than necessarily your skill that's on show. But I think it's the way that we're going to see things moving forward, because that is what teams want to do. They want to collect those points for their World Test Championship victories and move forward. So get used to those conditions, because I think that's what's coming.
And we have a lot of tests in Asia this year. Roscoe, we'll start with the batting. Last week we spoke at length about the fact that Henry Nicholls has been given a very long run here to prove that he can still score runs at this level. Again, it was a single test match, a single-figure test match for him. Tim Southee, in fact, scored more runs than him. So is that the last time we potentially see Henry Nicholls play test cricket? Because he has, before this test series, in 15 innings, he'd only scored over 30 once. So what would you make of it? You've played a lot of cricket with him, and you've played under Gary Stead, and he lets players have a fair crack at it. What would your opinion of that be at the moment?
Yeah, I think whether I agree with it, I think he'll still play the next test match. They've mentioned in the past horses for courses, even though he did score 200. Ajaz Patel got 10 wickets and didn't play the next test. So there's something about batters. I think batters get a little bit more rope than bowlers. I think we've seen that it's an ageing side a little bit, and with how well Rachin Ravindra played at the World Cup, I was surprised that they couldn't find a position for him in the team. Nicholls, his record in New Zealand is fantastic. His record overseas isn't quite, is nowhere near. But I think with the way that Southee and Stead have been, and the captains beforehand have been pretty loyal to batsmen, I feel like he'll get another opportunity. I think South Africa coming out here, not quite, could be their C or D team. But no, I feel like, he's had a lot of rope I think we need to get Ratchin Ravindra in there somehow, and I think Henry Nicholls is probably the only spot up for grabs at the moment.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and Scotty, I'm sure you will as well. We talked about this was his sort of potentially his last chance, but we do need to see Ratchin. I mean, he was so superb in that One-Day World Cup. He's had a crack at Test cricket before. I think he's earned the opportunity to have another go at it. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's what we think they should do versus what we think they will do, and that's the question. I think they need to. We talked about it. It's almost a rinse and repeat from last week, isn't it? Where you've got to get the player, and that's Ratchin Ravindra, in there right now. All that whole batting unit's over 30 years of age, and that doesn't mean you have to forcibly move people out. But when you actually do have a replacement that needs to play, then yes, it has to be the player who perhaps is at the bottom of that pecking order, and that to me is Henry Nicholls. Now, he's been a terrific, as Ross said, terrific player for New Zealand over many seasons now. But at this point in time, I think Gary Stead has to start thinking about who's the next player in our batting lineup that has experience. We do not want the situation we've had previously where 3 or 4 players give it away together and then you're searching for 3 or 4 positions all at once. You have to try and, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here, just go step by step and allow each player a few games so that you do have that stability all the way through and you don't get yourself into trouble where you're trying to find a whole new top order at once. And I think that means Ratchin Ravindra must play the next game. So
when we look at the players at the squad, one player who I feel has just been like a bit unlucky in a lot of instances is Will Young. He's been there or thereabouts for such a long time. He's obviously a great team man because he's always in the squad. Roscoe, do you think there's a place for him in this Test series at home? We've obviously got South Africa first and then Australia. Does he fit in now, or has Ratchin sort of come in and surpassed him? Where do you think he now sits in this Test unit?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few unlucky Test players in our history, and I think Will Young sort of fitting into that mould a little bit. I think Ratchin has definitely probably overtaken him purely on his form in ODI cricket, but as what's happened with a lot of Test players over the years, they end up opening the batting when I don't think they're openers. I don't think Will Young is an opener. He's a 3 or 4 or 5 batter, but because the only spot that he had in the team was to open the batting, he had to take that opportunity. Obviously, Devon Conway was there or thereabouts, and then has taken his opportunity once he qualified. So, unfortunately for Will, I think Ratchin has overtaken him. Then also you add the fact that Ratchin bowls left-arm spin, and in New Zealand we don't traditionally play a lot of spin. Our bowlers, we go in with a full-prong fast bowling attack, and then the spinners almost just fill in those gaps in between where Ratchin or Glenn Phillips will come into it. I still feel like Will Young has got a Test career to have. As we said, with the art of 2020 cricket and a lot of players playing around the world, I'm sure over the next couple of years some players will start choosing franchise over country, and then that might give him his opportunity.
And he certainly deserves his opportunity. Like I say, he's been a great team man and he's been around a long time. If we look at Glenn Phillips and his performance in that Test series, like I said earlier, it was like he was playing on a different pitch in parts there, Scotty. Is he now sort of locked in at a number 7? He gives us all in the field with the ball. The man... He's a bit of a workhorse and he really does seem to go looking for it. He really gets fizzed up for it. It must be nice to have around the team. But do you think he's done enough now that we see some more of him in this spot?
Look, I don't think you would cement him into that position yet, because it is a conditions-based thing. When you think of New Zealand conditions, the spinners don't really do a huge amount of work. So someone like Glenn Phillips may actually come into play more in New Zealand, batting at that 7 position, allowing the 4 fast bowlers. If you've got Ratchin Ravindra in there as well, then you've got a little bit of left arm and off spin, just to perhaps bowl 10, 12, 14 overs per 80 over new ball. And that's the way that things tend to go in New Zealand. It gives you a better balance. Someone like Michael Bracewell might step back in there as well. So I think, he's made every post a winner, that is for sure. He's putting his name and his hand up to say, I want to play both in New Zealand and away. I can do a more than useful part-time job with the ball. I'm picking you up wickets. We know how good in the field he is. And that aggressive batting at that 7 around that second new ball time. offers some real options. We saw someone like Brendan McCullum and Chris Cairns used to do that back in the day. So, Glenn Phillips can certainly make a really defined role for himself in all conditions, and he's doing a great job at saying, look, it's me, I want that job, give it to me.
Were you impressed with what you saw over there from him, Ross?
Yeah, I think so. And as Scotty said, I think he was, first and foremost, he was picked as an off spinner. We needed someone to spin the ball the other way, and we had, Ajaz, Satner and Ish spinning the ball the other way, so we needed someone like him to come in. I think the way he played in that second test was no surprise, and we needed, we're so far behind the game, but he has the ability to take on the spin, very Indian-like, but un-New Zealand-like. He got, outside the ball, let the ball turn into him, and backed himself to keep hitting the ball. And that 80-odd in that first innings, changed the game and brought New Zealand back into the game. But whether he can have that same impact in New Zealand on wickets that are seaming, we've got to give him that opportunity. But I don't think him stepping up to number 6 as well. I think him and Blundell, whether Blundell keeping 120 overs, 130 overs in the field, I don't think Phillips batting at 6 is out of the question either.
I heard Captain Tim Southey talking about Glenn Phillips and plying his trade around the world, and actually he's played on some pretty tricky wickets at the CPL and IPL and what have you. Is this a case, do you think, Scotty, of seeing that actually sometimes plying your T20 trade around the world can actually pay dividends in the longer format of the game, because he did play it very differently on that wicket to everyone else?
Look, I think it's many things. I think you bang on. I think once you've experienced all those conditions, though, what the guys played on in Bangladesh, they don't experience in New Zealand and probably in many parts of the world as well. So I think you're right. All the experience of the turning wickets of India, the CPL, all of that kicks in. But then it's also your own decision on how your mentality when you play. How are you going to attack the innings when you get out there and the ball is spitting every now and again, and you know that there is going to be a wicket-taking delivery come your way? So, do you play in a defensive way and try and wait for the bad ball? Do you look to be aggressive and put the bowler under pressure? It takes a lot of, mental strength to say, right, this is how I'm going to play, even though our team is in trouble, and this is how I'm going to go and try and win the game for our team. Now, Glenn Phillips did that expertly as well. So when you couple that mentality that he had with that experience he has had playing in those conditions, I think, he deserved the fruits of his labour, because he was simply the difference between the two teams.
Roscoe, Mitch Santner coming in for Ish Sodhi in the second test match. Has he done enough now to, I guess, be the first pick over Ish, given how Ish performed in that first test match, or where do you think that balance lies?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I thought he came in and bowled very well. Obviously, the conditions suited him. But Ajaz, once again, bowled fantastically well. But then don't underestimate his 40-odd, 30 or 40 in the partnership with Phillips at the end there. Obviously, we're back home in New Zealand. We traditionally don't play our spinners very often, and we haven't gone in with a specialist spinner for a long time. In the Mount, it's probably the only wicket that we might play a specialist spinner at. So will they go with a Satner? I think we know that Ajaz is probably not going to play. But there's a lot of options with the part-timers, with Phillips, Ratchin and Satner. But yeah, it's probably only one test match that they get an opportunity, knowing that the next 3 test matches are probably going to be on greenish surfaces.
It's been an interesting but huge year for a lot of cricketers in this country. I mean, you go from the New Zealand summer, you got IPL, then you've got the American, the Major League cricket that happened, maybe some played in the CPL. Then you've got the Cricket World Cup. There was also a tour to Bangladesh of the shorter format before the World Cup. Then you've got these tests coming into the New Zealand summer, and perhaps maybe we're seeing just how tired some of these players are. I look at Devon Conway, for example, playing in a series that we're not used to sort of seeing him look like that, I suppose. He started off the World Cup campaign with a hiss and a roar, obviously with that century in the opening game. But when you look at the schedules and you look at the likes of Devon Conway, Scott Styris, do you think there's just too much cricket on at the moment, or players are going to have to learn to balance out those schedules a little better?
There's been too much cricket for a really long time. This is not something new. I think that's the first thing we have to acknowledge. It's been crying out for the ICC to step in and define some sort of schedule or season or put some parameters around what can happen at certain times, because there's two things I think you want to do. One is protect the players from being injured and keeping the product good, but then also making the spectators keep their interest as well. And if it's just going to go as a roadshow for 12 months of the year, I don't think the fans also miss it enough to then want to be able to keep engaging themselves with whatever tournament is going on. So there's a whole heap of factors in it. But the long and the short, when you look at it from a player's perspective, is that, yes, that it is a grind and it becomes grueling. And you just perhaps just go from tournament to tournament and just think, okay, well, if I don't score runs here today, then I've got another opportunity tomorrow, and then I've got another opportunity the next day. And I don't think you ever want that. So there's some real decisions to be made, I think, that come above the players' level, the team's level, and I'd love to see something come about it. And there are some suggestions out there, and the ICC, I think, will take some steps with regards to one-day cricket, how they try and keep that relevant. So, it's not a simple answer, I don't think, at this stage.
No, it certainly doesn't feel a simple answer. And the one-day game, I actually found a lot of people saying to me, God, I forgot how much I love one-day cricket until that World Cup happened. I also just remembered I forgot that series that we had in England before the Bangladesh series, before the World Cup, before Bangladesh again. Roscoe, no disrespect, Scotty, but you're a little closer to the game in terms of playing. Was it feeling too much for you because you were playing all three formats for the best part of your career and other tournaments were popping up? As a player, what does it do to you mentally? Are you just mentally fatigued the whole time, does it feel like? Because it's not like you got your home comforts or anything.
Laura, that is because Roscoe was forced to get out of slip and have to run around. You have to understand these things.
Sorry, Scotty.
That is rich. I learned from the best in Scott Styris.
That is rich.
I left, and then Scotty was there, and then when Scotty left, then I just passed the mantle on. So it's all about passing the mantle on. But thanks, Scotty.
Yeah.
I'm still sure not as many people have played for as many teams as Scott Styris has. But yes, Roscoe, please do tell us.
No, I think it's obviously easier as a batsman than a bowler. And you've got to remember that county cricket has been around for a long period of time, and players would play the New Zealand summer and then play a whole season of county cricket, and there was no, no one said that they were fatigued or anything like that. Now, in Devon Conway's defence, he has played first-class cricket in New Zealand or in South Africa in this case, and maybe played a little bit of off-season. Now he's going tournament to tournament, and he's never really done it before. And you're playing in the MLC, and then 2 days later you're playing in the 100-ball competition. Players have got to be realistic. They want to chase the dollar, but at the same time you're going to have to sometimes pick and choose which tournament you end up going to, because you are going to be mentally and physically tired. It definitely is easier when you don't have kids and your partner can travel around with you, or when you have one kid. As Scotty didn't really need to worry about that because Nicky did everything. But
that's true.
I mean, all those little things makes it harder. But what I find a little bit strange is when you go to all these tournaments, but then you end up getting rested for international games. I think there needs to be, a little bit of thought that goes into what tournaments players go to. But you can't begrudge them for going and trying to earn a living, but there's got to be a balance. And I agree with Scotty, ICC probably have to step in and probably take it away from probably the board and the player in some instances.
Yeah, I agree with the international, the resting when they come to play for, New Zealand. That has always surprised me. And also, Roscoe, don't forget, Victoria does everything for you as well. OK, now let's talk about ODI cricket some more. There is a squad that has been named to play Bangladesh when they come to New Zealand to kick off our one-day summer here in Aotearoa. If we look at the side, captained by Tom Latham, again, a lot of those big-name players that we're talking about who've played a lot of tournaments this year are being rested, but that does mean an opportunity for some young players to come through. There are three debutants I'm most looking forward to. Eddie Ashok from Auckland, O'Rourke that we talked about, looking forward to seeing him. Could he potentially, we see him in the test format this year if things go well for him in this. And Josh Clarkson, who I think has just come ahead in leaps and bounds. His career has been fascinating to watch. He is, when he first came on the scene, the domestic scene, a lot of people likened him to Chris Cairns with his ability with the bat. Scott Styris, when you look at this ODI squad, are you happy with it? Is it a good squad in your mind?
Yeah, very good. I am happy with it. This is the opportunity to give players a rest and try and see where that next wave is coming from. I think New Zealand's success over the last 8 or 10 years has also coincided when they've had a really strong New Zealand A program. So I like the way that the experience is being achieved for that next wave of player coming through. Now, you're right about Josh Clarkson. He's that old. I played against him. That's saying something. And you're right. The reputation of him at the time, he could certainly hit a long ball, and he had all the natural skills. So it's always been frustrating from my own personal perspective that we haven't seen him take and make those leaps that players need to make to get to the international side. So I'm glad that that's happened in the last 12 months or 2 years for him, and that he is getting an opportunity, because I think he's got all the skills to get there. So very good side. Like what I'm about to see, because we just might find the next Ratchin Ravindra, if you like, to come and be a real banker for this team moving forward, especially with the T20 World Cup coming in 2024.
Josh Clarkson, a Stags boy. Roscoe, you spent a lot of time with him. You'll be feeling really pleased to see him get this opportunity, and you know he'll be so excited for it.
Yeah, very much so. I think when I played last season, he was head and shoulders the best middle order player, I think, going around in the competition. Obviously had a few injury issues with elbows and backs and things like that, and don't underestimate his bowling. I think we've talked a lot about his batting, and probably the biggest hitter going around in the circuit, but his bowling is a little bit there. I think especially on wickets that are a bit low and slow. He's a tall bowler, probably that Colin de Grandhomme, 125, 130, just bowl wicket to wicket, to give the skipper an option. I think, I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes, and hopefully he can turn that potential into reality over the next little while. And obviously we just finished the World Cup. We need to start looking towards the next World Cup in 2027. I think all three of these players will feature, or I hope will feature heavily over the next 3 or 4 years and into that World Cup in 2027.
So one of the interesting things, Ish Sodhi has been named for just game one of this series. Now, I feel a bit for Ish here, because he didn't play as much as he would have liked in India during the Cricket World Cup. He only got one crack at the Test match in Bangladesh, and now he's just getting the one ODI in New Zealand. I'm presuming that I don't know what the plan around this is, or what Gary Stead and Sam Wells, the new selector, have decided here. But Eddie is a real prospect, and he's done very well for Auckland so far domestically in the last couple of seasons he's had. But is that a bit rough on Ish Sodhi, do you think, Scott Styris? Because this, I'm sure he would have felt, with them resting the likes of Satner, could have been a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, this one I'm on the fence a little bit about, I must confess, because, it's all right for us to sit here and say maybe it's time Henry Nicholls stepped aside. Well, is it time, with the World Cup being 4 years away? Will Ish Sodhi still be there 4 years' time for the next World Cup when it does roll around? Or is it the Adi Ashoks of this world? Is it time to give them opportunities to make sure that they do hit the next World Cup with 40, 50 games under their belt if they can, or 30, 40, whatever the number is? So is that therefore, unfortunately, time for Ish to move aside? And even as he is, I know he's in Canterbury, but he's really an ND man. It's possibly, is that time for him to just say, look, we're going to keep you around for the T20s. You do such a good job along with Satner in those middle overs. We want to keep you there, but we are going to mix and match you a little bit more with other options, and just to see where they sit in the pecking order. So I would put him in the same boat as Henry Nicholls myself.
What do you think about that, Roscoe?
Yeah, I think Ish is an automatic selection in 2020s. And even though he's been around for so long, I think he's still only 30 odd. So I think he's still got a big part to play. Agree with Scotty, it's a tough one. Here we are talking about giving these guys an opportunity, but then someone has to miss out. I think in time there can be a place for Eddie and Ish to play in the same team. I don't think they both can bat a little bit, and what I've seen around Eddie on the circuit, he's just got something about him. So we need to give these guys an opportunity, finding their balance and still giving Ish the opportunities as well, because I think at 30, leg spin, the hardest art to do. We still need, he's still getting better and better, and he can still be playing for New Zealand, I feel, at 35, 37. So I wouldn't be discounting Ish out just yet. He just needs to find that balance of how we can get these youngsters in, and also having Ish around to teach them as well.
Around the world, if
the
we
other
look at
thing
what
too,
is-
Laura.
Oh,
Sorry, Laura. I'll just finish that off with as well.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. I'll just jump off the back of what Roscoe said there and just say that there is no leg spinner anywhere in the world. If he's going to play a game and then sit out, then play a game and sit out, you'll never get the best possible results out of what they do. Look at, Adam Zampa does it for Australia. All the leg spinners around the place, Shane Warne, they didn't ever succeed when they sat a game out. So it's a real fine line and a balancing act they need to make sure they get right with Ish Sodhi, because if he plays every game, that's when you get the best performance.
Yeah, and you can't underestimate what that does to the mentality of a player when you are not sure, sort of game to game, series to series, how much you're going to be played. I'd certainly feel for him in that regard. If we look at what's happening around the world, Pakistan getting ready to play Australia and India in South Africa. Who do you like in that Aussie series, Ross Taylor?
I think Aussies at home are very hard to beat. Then you add that Pakistan fast bowlers. Are very inexperienced and they haven't got their top lineup there. I think it's going to be a tough one. Obviously, a lot's been made of Mitchell Johnson's comments, so I think it's added an extra spice. Not necessarily just again playing Pakistan, but I think the public have gotten behind it. The series might have sort of just meandered away a little bit, but it's definitely added a lot more people to talk about it, and that can only be good for Cricket Australia and the team.
It is wild how many headlines that man has grabbed over his career. Look, you have to applaud the boldness of the man saying, I'd like to finish up in Sydney. That's like how I'd like to end my career that way. And good for him. Like, cool, good on you. But do you see that happening, Scott Styris? Is he putting more pressure on himself in this first test match? Because, of course, he's only been named for the first test at this stage. And then these comments come in. Is this going to spark a wee flame under him, do you think, to make sure that he does play that third test now? What's your take on it?
Look, I think it's set in stone now that that's what will happen. The selectors won't want to create headlines and pull him out after a game or two and just say, right, we're actually going to move in a direction one game early, especially if they're winning. It might change if they lose the first test and the openers don't score any runs. But look, I think David Warner's played enough that he'll get this series and he'll finish in Sydney, and that'll be the end of David Warner for a little while. Yeah,
well, Renshaw is breathing right down his neck. He is scoring a lot of runs domestically in Australia. So it's an interesting one for sure, and one that you bet your bottom dollar I'll be watching that series. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays. I hope Mitchell Johnson writes another column. That's all I can say. The Big Bash is on. You can watch that all live here on Sky Sport. And in the opening match, our very own, who's on the show as well, Colin Munro, got 99 not out. And boy, those last 2 overs were excruciating to watch because we also desperately wanted him to get that 100. But as he said when he came off, it is a team game. And that's all that matters at the end of the day. They got enough runs on the board to win. I'm not sure Colin Munro always gets the credit he deserves. That man has forged a remarkable career. You talk about players that weren't sure if they were playing, series to series internationally for New Zealand. But what he has done on the international circuit is nothing short of spectacular. He has forged such an amazing career, and he is doing perhaps what Devon Conway maybe will learn to do in time. He is going tournament to tournament, and he is competing, he is scoring runs, he's contributing, and he is the player that everybody seems to want, Scott Styris. What do you think of how he's, forged this remarkable career? Something you tried to do, I think.
Yeah, look, I really enjoyed Colin Munro's performances for New Zealand. They were, if you were being honest, they were a little hit and miss. I think at one stage he had more international hundreds at the T20 international level than any other player. Now that shows the class and skills and match-winning ability that he had and New Zealand had. Now the problem is that we could then, as commentators, walk into a series and we knew exactly where the opposition were going to bowl to him. They were going to bowl under the armpit short, and they were going to bowl slower balls to change up his bat swing and his rhythm. And he wasn't quite able to find an adjustment to stop that from happening at the international level. But when he comes back a level, then I think he's been phenomenal. And any team around the world who goes after him and gets him, he's got such good hand-eye coordination. He's a brilliant timer of the ball. He's a performer in big games. He's everything you absolutely want. And I think, he can continue doing this for another few seasons. And good luck to him, because he, in some ways he's a player that we missed out on trying to get even a little bit more out of for New Zealand.
Roscoe, what's your take on Munners? You played a lot of cricket with him and you've seen what he's gone on to do after, things internationally didn't play out the way I'm sure he would have liked. What do you make of what we're seeing from him now?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if Manas was to have come through a couple of years later and been able to play in these tournaments and to have played for New Zealand, whether New Zealand cricket would have been a little bit more accommodating. But, I mean, it hasn't been a surprise. It's been a fantastic, contributor to all the teams he's gone to. But one thing we probably definitely didn't get out of him was his leadership. I think he's gone to these teams, he's added leadership, he's captained a few of these teams and won tournaments. He's now captaining Brisbane. So obviously they regard him highly as a captain and a tactician. So, there was something that I think would surprise a few of the New Zealand. He was very quiet in the team, but he obviously has found his voice around the traps, and I think it's been fantastic. So, no, he's definitely got another 2 or 3 years of domestic cricket, and I'm sure the more he plays, the better he's getting. So it's great to see him do that, and I wish him all the best.
Yeah, and credit to his wife, Teray, because they've got 2 beautiful children, and that woman is a saint as well. Right, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for your time. Scotty, we'll let you hit the shops. David Jones got a great Christmas window, and I know that's what you'll be wanting to do. No golf, I'm sure.
Chapel Street. We're off to Chapel Street, and it's not for me.
Yeah, right, mate, whatever you say. Have a happy Christmas. Thank you so much, Roscoe. Thank you for joining us from Hamilton. Big plans with the kids for Christmas?
I've just been home. First Christmas at home for 20 years, so looking forward to not having to go and play a game on Boxing Day, and there goes Santa there. Nikki.
Hello, beautiful Nikki. Enjoy Chapel Street. Do me proud out there.
Yeah, she can't hear you, which is great.
Take his credit card.
And she can't speak, which is even better.
Funny. Scott Styris, you're a brave man. He's a brave man. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on No Boundaries. You have a fabulous Christmas, and we will see you in the new year.